All right, my name is David Marshall.
And I'm Ralph Johnson.
Playwriting, ultimately with playwriting, it was a matter of I saw that there were many roles that I wanted to do, but at the time there's like a lot of the shows that I was seeing happening at the time weren't particularly towards my ethnicity and whatnot, and so I just was like, I'm gonna open up things to I wanted to open up things to where it would be open to all people of all races, and even with hopefully down the line, open it up for gender related things as well, or keeping things open from a gender perspective as well. Um, that was ultimately with when I started writing for musicals, but with playwriting, this is my first play that I've put together. I knew that I wanted to do a play eventually, but I hadn't run into the material. In conversation, it came up about October 13th, like Friday the 13th kind of aspect of it, and how it's the superstition behind it and everything. And I've been wondering, I wonder what was the first thing that kind of started that whole thing. And so after looking it up, I found out this story about the fall of the Templar Order and how this is October the 13th is considered to be dating back all the way back to 1314. How it was cursed. It was a cursed day because of all the things that had transpired in that. So that was what started out as the material that I would work with to bring together this story. The Templar Order was uh, a form of militia in a sense that was kind of formed around the many people. It was the army of the people in a sense at that time, but it had over time it built up a bit of renown, and it became like attached to the church at that time years ago, and so. Eventually, the Templar Order became so powerful that it was before their fall, they were in the process of actually trying to purchase their own land to be able to, like, in a sense, become their own country and whatnot. But up until then, they had just been essentially like an army for hire, basically. An army that the King of France utilized and actually was greatly indebted to um, uh, at that time before they fell. But yeah, there's so much history behind this group, and you can see all the multiple crusades that the church went to. The Templar Order was uh, vastly a part of that, and so all of the crusades that they would go to recapture the Holy Land and whatnot over in the Middle East and whatnot to bring Jerusalem back to her former glory or whatnot. That was the general concept at that time, the idea behind the Crusades and whatnot. And so there was a particular mindset. That was the mindset, is that they were the army of the Lord here on earth and whatnot, which was it's looking at it now, it's like this is pretty messed up altogether. All of the atrocities and whatnot that took place in then. But yeah, it's a really um, it was really fun to have to dig deep into the history of the order. Ultimately, I took about 6 months to do research to try to find out everything that I could about it. I'd say essentially that was the first step. After I was able to figure out where I wanted to take a look at the bigger, broader picture of it all. After that, I would go and after I did my research, then I went and created an outline, basically trying to go back before a certain time. Go back. I didn't want the story to take place all within the same year, so this is spanning over the. It starts in 1304, and the show ends in 1920. No, not 19. Sorry, 1304, and then 1321. It is where it ends. And so I just wanted to have this bubble of time where it's like you could see the progression of this ultimate story. So I start at a funeral of Guillaume, who was um, the Grand Master of the Hospitaller Order. So it's not the Templars, but it was like another order that had ties to the Templars and whatnot, and so it was, and so it starts with that, and then it leads into Villaret, who's essentially the main character. He's young, but he becomes the order master of the Hospitaliers, and he has this relationship with Molay, Jacques de Molay, who is the Grand Master. He's the last Grand Master of the Templar Order, and so essentially you see the relationship between the two of them and whatnot. And so I wanted to kind of take that relationship slowly and be able to show how Villaret tracks it from the beginning and then towards the end of the overall story. This is me trying to give an analysis without giving away any spoilers. But yeah, so after I did my research, I created an outline from beginning to end. And then it came time to write the dialogue. I was having a lot of trouble figuring out what I wanted the dialogue to be. Um, but what I ended up doing was finding music that I thought fit the particular moods that I wanted to capture throughout the whole show. And so, in a sense, the music actually came first before the words. And so, after I found out the different music that I would have, and this is all ranging classical music and with orchestras and whatever that is I use to decide the mood of each scene. And so what I essentially do is like I would put my headphones on and everything, and I would sit there and I'd turn on the particular track for the particular scene, and then I'd start writing as if like the voices that are within the characters, that they're a part of the orchestra. And there's different entry points. There's different moods and cadences that the voices go to, and it's like um, but yeah, it's just ultimately trying to find a way to bring the two together and have them complement each other. Uh, we before it was decided for the show to that PATIO was going to do the show, I had talked to Matt Fitzgerald, who's the artistic manager at PATIO Playhouse. They did an in-house reading real quick just to like try to hear all the voices together and everything. And at the time we felt it was like we're like, yeah, it's a nice show. We didn't play any of the music. We just had it just straight on with just the dialogue and the reading the stage directions, and we're like, yeah, we're like, it's all right and everything, and it'll probably need some revisions and different things and whatnot as any show. And that's what we decided at the halfway point. And then because there's 4 acts within the whole show, but so we finished Act 2 and we kind of had a little brief discussion and everything, and then um, we discussed about how the dialogue it carried on a lot, and there were a lot of words at different points where we were worried that audience members were going to be. We were wondering if they would or wouldn't be able to hang on for the descriptions and different things that were going on, and then upon the finishing of the final monologue, the Matt went and played. He went onto YouTube and he saw that he saw where the song was supposed to end within the show and everything, and so he started it at a certain point within the monologue, and then everyone was just like, "Oh, whoa!" It's like the music definitely heightened everything that was there within the dialogue, and it's like this epic finale song. It's the song that was used for it is Requiem in D minor by Mozart. But so it's like it goes and it's just like you hear that chorus, and you hear the choir and you hear like all of the music kind of just like take you away someplace else, and you're just like, oh wow, and you feel the weight behind all of the words that Villaret is saying. And so I'd say after I was able to figure out the music, that's when I was able to figure out what I wanted for the dialogue in the show. And it's uh, I'd say that that was probably be the final step was the dialogue ultimately. Like the music definitely is a part of it, is and it makes up the whole. So yeah, that was. But yeah, I definitely come definitely from a musical background. Throughout high school, I was in competitive choir, and even afterwards, as I still did choir and different things, and sung in different events and everything. Um, Before being a writer, I was more of a musical theater performer. I done multiple different things. Actually, I met Ralph doing ragtime, uh, where he played grandfather. That's the name of the role, right, Ralph?
Yep,
Yeah, yeah,
you've got it.
yeah. We met there, and he's just honestly like one of the like I consider him one of my. He's like my mentor, honestly.
Thanks, David.
He's yes, and he's been really helpful and just like very encouraging. But yeah, it's like it's a. So I started it over with within musical theater, and doing different musical roles and whatnot, and then uh, and then so I have sorry, excuse me, I had to take a moment right there, but yeah, he's but let me center back. The I started writing musicals because there were roles like the Jack Kelly roles, like in Newsies and whatever. It's like there's different roles that I saw, then I was like, oh my gosh, this would be an amazing role to play. But it's like I didn't feel like I would be casted in that role due to my like ethnicity and whatnot. But So I started writing musicals to kind of counteract that and to give others the opportunity to have like these pop roles and whatever, and not feel restricted to a particular category of like performer or like role. And so I've been within music programs and music composition and stuff, and so a lot of the things that I learned within that I was able to bring over to apply the music to this show, and it was really helpful and beneficial.
That I think will be helpful to you and other audience members. It's important that you listen. There's a lot of verbiage in this play, and the verbiage is important. Um, and I think that's one thing that might be helpful that we're on Zoom because we don't have the trappings of staging. So you're not watching people walking around a stage and having a direct interaction with each other. So listening to the text and listening to the music becomes more important. Just a heads up, that's going to help you.
So pertaining to the characters, I started with I got the main list and everything, and there were certain characters that there were characters that I even still have in the what would they call it? It's like in the character breakdown um, in the script, whereas like I had initially planned on them having more dominant roles or whatever, or actually having speaking roles. But down the line, it was like I don't feel like I need it with this. But for instance, it's like I'm trying to. But yeah, it's like ultimately it all started with like kind of uh, finding the like the main people, like so Molay, who is the Templar leader, Villaret. Those were the two people who I was like they were the two people that we were going to be. It was a compare and contrast between those particular characters. And then you have Clement, who is Ralph Johnson. Is, it's like it's so ultimately it was a matter of taking these uh, taking these characters and then building a philosophy behind them and looking at the history behind them and seeing what who they were, according to history, and then trying to get it. It's the same as how it would be within like if we're actually acting within acting, how you have to go in depth and figure out who the character is. And so for me, my job was to find these guys, look at these characters, and then look at them from a historical context and try to write in a way that would best emulate these people and who they were. Um, but yeah, there are many characters who also is like in history they didn't necessarily have such a prevalent they didn't have that much of a strong presence, but for the sake of drama and the sake of like building up on that cast, I decided that it was going to be necessary to bring them out into the light. Let's see. So it's the most of it, the backdrop of the show and all the events that are happening in the show. Those are real. Those are really those are things that are actually happening. The things that they'll comment offhandedly about something that is happening in the background that you don't necessarily see on stage. That's all stuff that's actually a part of history. Now there are certain, there are times where it's like we don't know exactly what a person would have felt in a particular instance and whatnot. But I do my best to try to build enough and do these people justice because they were real. They lived once, and I wouldn't want to just completely uh, like put words in their mouth of things that they wouldn't say, and to paint them in a certain way uh, be that would be sorry, that would cause it to be like cause some injustice within that towards them. I wouldn't want to destroy their name in a way that, or to lead people to believe that a certain person is horrible and whatnot. I wrote primarily on a basis of the actions that they commit and the different things that um, the decisions that they made over the course of these few years. Um, One of the characters, the character of Cassandra. Cassandra is she's a role that's a role played by Tessa Grantham. Uh, for Cassandra, her role is the only one that I would say that is sorry, excuse me. Cassandra is the only role that is not a true character. Cassandra is actually just a work of fiction, but I do my best to um, try to find. I needed somebody to um, it was another instrument in the sense that I needed to clear up the air that was there and to further expound upon the thoughts of the other people that existed in the time. But yeah, it's uh, do I it makes I often wonder in a sense about how the character of Cassandra would have possibly fared because in the show she's very outspoken and there's a lot of things that um, it in this tragedy she's the only one primarily that is in a sense left unscathed where everybody else is there are burns and everything that happened throughout the show, but she for the most part remains unscathed, and so it was in a sense it it does make one question if someone like Cassandra was in control of like the situation. If someone like Cassandra was there, would a lot of these events have happened and whatnot? And but yeah, so for that reason, yeah, I have a even though she's a work of she's a fictional character, it makes me I do admire her in a sense. But yeah. Presenting it in this way. It was granted with all of the restrictions that we have with Zoom due to the pandemic and whatnot. It Seeing it as a Zoom presentation at first, when thinking about it, I was like, obviously this is the only choice that we have if we're wanting to be safe. and conscientious of the situation that we're in. I'm like, this is definitely the way to go. But at the same time, I was worried at first. But after we got our cast that we had for our first reading, that was outside of the boardroom kind of thing. It After seeing the cast that we had after that, when we had basically every role cast instead of having people double for roles, I quickly was just like, oh yeah, this is gonna be good, just like this. But yeah. Oh, actually, Ralph probably would have a better understanding of this because I actually am just in charge of helping with the music, so I don't know what all the performers are doing. So, Ralph, do you have? Yeah. Would you let us
So
know?
in these COVID times, oddly, I'd never heard of Zoom before March of last year. Um, and theaters just can't meet right now. We can't. I was contacted by David if I would be interested in doing a Zoom reading. And it's much like rehearsals and performances will be much like being in a theater, really, except we just won't be in personal contact. So we log on to Zoom. The protocols for a typical theater production. We have call times to be at the Zoom theater at a certain time. The stage manager will call places where we're ready to go. And then we just read from the script, taking ourselves, stopping our video when we're not in a scene, muting ourselves when we have nothing to say. And there's cues for each scene, and there are multiple scenes throughout the play. So it's much like, oddly, it's much like being in a theater setting. We're just not seeing each other person to person. You know, reading new work is always a good education. I knew nothing about this period in our history, and I knew nothing about these characters. I've never played a pope before. That's new. Um, and it's been a good education for me just listening to David's script and how these characters are developed and how they interplay with one another. I'm learning a lot. Each time we read through the script, I learn things. And oddly, this period in history is much like what we're living through now. Um, um, it's interesting how society doesn't learn much over time. We keep doing the same things. We keep doing the same successes and the same failures over and over and over again. So the messages of this play are much like the messages that we get in today's society.
Listening to Aaron Sorkin and his writing, and whether it's like the West Wing newsroom or if it's like all of the different things that he's been involved in, and then having a chance to actually listen to him. I used to scour the internet constantly, just looking through all of his interviews, just trying to learn as much as I can about the writing of dialogue, because he's honestly an amazing writer, and I have a really great respect for him. In terms of musical inspiration, I'd say that my biggest takeaway would probably be, and it's for a lot of the people who have been involved in like musical theater thing. It's just going to probably be like nails on a chalkboard. But I would say that, well, for some anyways, but I would say that Lin-Manuel Miranda has a big influence on me in the sense of his use of words and being able to, his rhyme scheme and the way that he puts words to music, that really has a really strong impact on me. But yeah, there's not to say that that's not the only musical that I would ever be like, oh yeah, that's the only one that I actually like, because there's vast ones like Ragtime, for instance. another one is like there are really great pieces out there, and I ultimately try to look at all of them and be and try to uh, grasp what, grasp whatever lessons I can from all of them, because they all have a story. They're all teaching about humanity as a whole and where we're headed and where we've been. It's all really really good art.
It's interesting as a musician and as an actor and as a listener. I think David's done a really nice job in interweaving the feel of the music to the text. So often when I go see a movie, I'll come away from the movie saying, "Gee, that score was great," and people look at me like I'm nuts because I think music can add so much to the tone of the story. In this, the classical pieces that David has selected really match and go well with the tone of the scenes that are being performed. And I think that's one of the pluses of this piece.
I
I,
think
I think it's important to note too that the music of the classical periods, um, um, Lin-Manuel gets to do his music based on the foundations of those classical times. Early musicals, they provide the foundation for what Lin-Manuel has done. And he's just building upon that big old house that's being built many hundreds of years before.
And now David is building on that as well, right? We have
yes.
the history continues.